Today in Final Fantasy, we get an equipment that's 2 Nettlesis and a Trenchcoat, our wacky red enchantment from the set, and even some train suplexing. Let's break it down. Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Final Fantasy spoilers. So we've reached the end of week 1 of our 3-week Final Fantasy spoiler season, and we have some pretty interesting cards to talk about today, which means we should probably jump right into it, start talking spicy new Final Fantasy cards. Before we do, a couple of quick reminders. First, if you need any of these cards, you can snag them from our sponsor Card Kingdom over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. Second, to keep up on all the latest previews throughout the day, you should head on over to MTGpreviews.com. Anyway, let's talk some Final Fantasy. So first up today, we get a new job select equipment in Machinist Arsenal. So Machinist Arsenal, 5 mana white equipment, it has job select. So when it enters, you make a 1/1 hero, you get to attach it to it. Then it says equip creature gets +2/+2 for each artifact you control, and is an artificer in addition to its other types, and you can equip it for 4 mana. So Machinist Arsenal, the card's kind of interesting. In a deck with a lot of artifacts, it can certainly make a super huge creature, and having job select means you're going to get that creature right away. So probably the best comparison is Nettlesis, maybe 2 Nettlesis in a Trenchcoat as someone put it, but essentially you're getting a similar effect, except you're getting +2/+2 instead of +1/+1, although you are paying way more mana, and you gotta have some colored mana in your deck, which is going to limit the decks that can actually play this card. So as far as standard is concerned, we do have support for equipment. It'll be interesting to see if it's enough to make a competitive standard deck, but like Cloud can tutor this up. Furion, you can make a copy of it and smash your opponent for a huge amount of damage. The question's gonna be, is this an equipment deck card or is this an artifact deck card? If you're playing an equipment deck, some equipment deck play like 3 equipment. It's like Stoneforge and you're tutoring up a small package of equipment. In a deck like that, Machinist Arsenal not gonna be that good, right? Because it needs a bunch of artifacts on the battlefield. On the other hand, if you're an artifact deck, this is going to make a super huge creature. I can imagine playing this in like the Simulacrum Synthesizer Repurposing Bay deck, where you just really get it flooding the board with artifacts, and this is probably consistently going to be like a 5 mana 10/10 or something. Although in those decks, I wonder, with Simulacrum Synthesizer being so good at making huge creatures, do you really need a card that just makes another huge creature? I'm not exactly sure. So I feel like this is a card that is powerful in theory, but I'm not sure what deck I'd actually play it in at 5 mana. It does seem designed to combo with Sid Timeless Artificer, one of the signpost uncommons from the Final Fantasy set, which really cares about artifacts and also artificers. So I think it's supposed to be a card for like a casual Sid deck as far as Commander is concerned. You kind of have the same question. So in an equipment deck, I think this could be very good as long as you're playing enough artifacts. If you're playing some sort of Voltron equipment deck, Captain America, Blainer, Battlehapper, Sir Gwyn, then I think this card could be good enough. If you have like 5 artifacts on the battlefield, which seems realistic, this is going to give +10/+10, which is a huge boost to power. It is kind of annoying to equip it 4 mana, but some of those commanders, actually all of these commanders, let you get around the equip cost in one way or another, which really helps if you gotta move this around. So I think that's one possibility. Also could just be good in artifact decks, Osgir, Brea decks that flood the board with artifacts. This is gonna make a super huge creature, although it is worth pointing out that Nettlesis itself isn't exactly a staple. I was looking on EDH Rec, and there's only 4 commanders that play Nettlesis at least half of the time. Nahiri, Forge and Fury, Anarid, Kennerid, Morska, and Kisgora, Forge Tyrant, and Chris Gora can't even play it because it's a mono red card. So if Nettlesis is kind of pretty fringe in Commander, I imagine this is probably going to be kind of fringe in Commander as well, but it is a card that can add a huge amount of power. So if you just want a big beefy creature that's even better than that because you can move it around if the creature dies in an artifact deck, Machinist Arsenal gonna get the job done. We also got one of the most fun cards from this set in Triple Triad. So Triple Triad, 6 mana red enchantment. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, each player exiles the top card of their library. Until end of turn, you may play the card you own that's exiled this way, and each other card exiled this way with lesser mana cost without paying their mana cost. So this card is super weird. So what this means in practice is you play this enchantment, it does nothing right away. You go to your next upkeep, everyone exiles the top card of your library. If you exile some big expensive 10-drop, you're probably going to get to play everything for free. You always get to play your card for free. Doesn't matter if it's a land or a 10-drop, you're always going to get to play it. But if you exile something big from your deck, then you're going to get to play all your opponent's cards for free too. And when that happens, this card is super busted. It's basically stolen strategy, but stolen strategy mixed with an Atali trigger if you hit something big and can cast everything for free. And we've seen Atalis be incredibly busted in Commander. So I think that Triple Triad, very interesting card. You can just play it fairly, run it out, probably in a deck that has a lot of expensive things to try to make sure you can cast your opponent's stuff some percentage of the time. So you can't just play it fairly, but you can also try to build around it. And if you build around it, the card gets even better. So as far as Standard is concerned, I would be very surprised if this card was good in Standard. It's one of those cards that scales with the table, right? If you have 4 opponents, you're exiling 4 cards each turn. If you're playing Standard, it's just you and 1 opponent, you're exiling 2 cards. If you low roll and hit a land or something, you don't get much value out of it for 6 mana. Plus, we're in a very aggressive Standard, so it's going to be tough to spend 6 mana for a card that doesn't do anything at all until your next turn. And then even once you get to your next turn, its effect's going to be very random. So it doesn't really seem like a competitive card. We already have Chartfoyer Warp Space in Standard, and it hasn't really caught on. And if you get both sides of that open, it kind of does the same thing. That said, if you want to just play this and overload your deck with really expensive bonds, summon Bahamut, Portal to Phyrexia, Ilugan, Eye of the Storms, it is kind of funny. Like, it can win you games when it works out, and I do love the chaotic nature of this card. You just never know what's going to happen when you spin it to win it. There is one card in Standard that kind of combos with it, which is Insatiable Avarice, which lets you search and put something on the top of your deck. So this is a way that you can guarantee on your next turn, you're going to get the Summon Bahamut, you're going to get the Portal to Phyrexia, whatever that big thing is that you want. And because you're putting a big thing on top of your deck, you're probably going to get your opponent's card for free too, so you hope they hit something halfway decent and get 2 cards for free, which does seem pretty cute. So I think that's the direction to go if you want to build around it in Standard. As far as Commander, that's where I think this card is really designed to be played. So in Commander, playing this card fairly, perfectly fine, especially if you're in some sort of Cast from Exile deck. It's a Good and Prosper style card. But if you're playing Prosper or Feldorn or Rocco, these commanders that care about casting things from exile, this is a really fun way to get the job done. So I think you can just play it fairly, especially in cast to exile stuff. It also just seems good in theft style decks. Like if the theme of your deck is trying to cast your opponent's stuff because you're Laughing Jasper Flynn or Plargan Nahiri, Don Andres, this also seems really good there. And in Commander, there's a lot more ways to build around this card. If you really want to go deep on Triple Triad, you can play Sensei's Divining Tops, you can play Scroll Racks, there's way more tutors like Vampiric Tutor. They let you tutor to the top of your deck. And if you're setting this up and putting your game-ending bomb on the top of your deck and doing that turn after turn, it is not going to take many turns with Triple Triad to just straight up win you the game. So I think the card seems super fun. I don't really expect it to be a competitive Standard card, but in Commander, I would just jam this for fun because I love these chaotic cards that create these big moments at the table. And if you want to do a little work building around it, it gets even better. We also got a bunch more of the Final Fantasy Through the Ages sheet. Finance-wise, nothing super high-end today. The most expensive card, I believe, is Command Beacon down at the bottom, which is like $8 or $9, but some super cool-looking and very playable legends like Mindraltha, very iconic commander, Carrick, one of the most busted mono-black commanders. Even Bruce Tarl Borisherter sees a reasonable amount of play as a partner. So even though these cards aren't super high-end price-wise, they are stuff that you're definitely going to be able to play in decks and get some use out of. In the world of lower rarity cards, apparently we got to show these 2 cards together. I'm not a Final Fantasy person, but apparently you'd suplex a train or something in Final Fantasy. Phantom Train doesn't seem like a very playable card. 4 mana for a 4/4 vehicle with trample, and you have to sack another artifact or creature to put a counter on it and turn it into a creature. So for the low cost of 4 mana and sacking a creature, you can end up with a 5/5 trampler, which isn't horrible, but probably not exactly playable. Suplex, on the other hand, seems like it could be a playable card. So it's 1 in a red for a sorcery that says choose 1, either deal 3 damage to target creature, and if that creature would die, it gets exiled, or exile target artifact. If that sounds familiar, Suplex is basically a braid with a twist. So the twist is a braid's an instant, suplex a sorcery. So that's one big vote in favor of a braid. On the other hand, exiling the artifact or the creature rather than just killing it is a big upside for suplex. So I'm actually very curious to see which of these cards ends up winning out. We've seen a braid on a bit of an upswing in standard, thanks to Corey Steelcutter giving us an artifact that we really need to kill. So I've been playing more of braids. The question is, does suplex beat out a braid? And the answer is, it's probably going to depend on the meta. So on one hand, being instant speed, really important in our very aggressive standard. You really need to be able to snipe the Monastery Swift Spear before the Monstrous Rage comes down and kills you. Same with the Heartfire hero. So that's one thing that makes me think maybe people stick with a braid. On the other hand, there's going to be situations where exiling the artifact or creature is a huge deal. Like a braid, yeah, you can kill a Monument to Endurance, but that doesn't keep your opponent from just reanimating it, Shikoing it, or whatever. Yes, it can kill an unstoppable slasher, but it's just going to come back and start attacking you again in a couple turns anyway. Suplex gets rid of these cards forever, so there is a meaningful upside to exiling. Plus, if you get back to, I guess, Legacy now because the bannings are timeless, it does deal with the One Ring permanently, which is a nice little upside. So Suplex, I think, is a playable card. We'll have to wait and see how the meta shakes out, but a braid has been very good, and at least situationally, in the right meta, in the right deck, Suplex can arguably be better than a braid. We also got a couple of Draft Chaff style cards that you can check out over at MTGPreviews.com. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our daily Final Fantasy spoilers for today. So what do you think of today's cards? What are you most hyped for? Let me know in the comments, and I'll be back tomorrow, I think, or maybe Sunday. I don't know. Whenever we get enough cards for another spoiler video, I'll be back with even more Final Fantasy spoilers. So until then, have an amazing day, everyone, and I will talk to you soon. Looking for even more magic? We can find yesterday's spoiler video here, or maybe the Against the Odds, where we tried to build the most ridiculous Urborg Scavengers possible in Standard.